In this video, we'll be looking at two different ways to create loops within our software. We'll be looking at while loops, and we'll also be looking at for loops. To start off with, we need our basic setup function that we have with all our programs, and of course our loop function that we also have. Firstly, we'll look at while loops. While loops are basically loops that loop while a particular condition is true. If we create a particular variable a and we initialize a, we can then create a while loop that uses this variable. So while a is less than 10, now we can do something. You'll notice we've got the curved brackets that specify where the condition is, and our curly braces that specify everything to do while this condition happens to be true. So we can change it and put in some code inside here that says, for example, a is equal to a plus 1. So while I is less than 10, it'll increment by 1 and keep on incrementing within this while loop, and when a is equal to 10, it'll exit the while loop. Now in this case we have a loop outside, and so we go back outside our main loop, our loop function, go into this while loop again and find that a is less than 10, or a is equal to 10, so we don't go into the while loop anymore. So maybe we'll put a bit of code in here to reset a again so that we go through our while loop again. So very basic type of loop there. While loop loops while a particular condition is true. Our next loop is the for loop, and the for loop's a bit more powerful than the while loop because it includes three things. It includes an initialization value for the variable that we're testing, a conditional value for the variable that we're testing, and an increment value for the variable that we're testing. So a typical for loop would look something like this. So we have our initialization. So at the start we're setting a equal to 0. Remember that this single equal is an assignment, not a test. We then have our conditional statement. So if a is less than 10, we're going to run the loop. If a is not less than 10, or if a is equal to 10, we don't run the loop anymore and we exit. And then we have our increment statement. Now this could be a decrement statement, but essentially when each time this loop runs through, it'll perform this operation. In this case, when we do a++, it's exactly the same as a equals a plus 1. It's just like a minus minus is equal to a equals a minus 1. We increment or decrement by 1. So this for loop is particularly handy and particularly powerful because we can very quickly create a loop that will loop a certain number of times based on our start condition, our end condition, and the amount that we increment or decrement by each time. So there's two different types of loops, a while loop and a for loop. I'll show you a special case for the while loop, and the special case is the while one loop. Now the while one loop is what we'd call an infinite loop, a loop that loops forever. And essentially it's because of this conditional statement. While true, it's essentially saying we want to perform the loop. Now is that 1 ever going to be a 0? Well, we've fixed it as a 1 value there, so it's always going to be 1. So it will loop forever. Having a look at it, our void loop function here is essentially a form of this while one loop. It's a loop that loops forever while we apply power and while it's actually running. So there's another special case of a while one loop, a loop that will always keep on looping.